Support comes from Missouri Forest Products Association, committed to sustainable and sound conservation of the state's forests, which support more than 41,000 Missouri jobs, resulting in a $10 billion industry. ChooseWood.com.
Welcome to St. Louis on the Air. I'm Don Marsh. Today we go behind the headlines. We begin with that special election in St. Louis. I sat down yesterday with reporters Rachel Lippmann and Jason Rosenbaum. Annie Rice handily won the 8th Ward aldermanic race this week, but as I suggested to Rachel, special elections such as this week's can be a little complicated.
It's governed by the St. Louis City Charter, which says that if it is a special election for a board of aldermen, there are no primary elections. So if you want the nomination of your party, if you want to run with a D or an R or a Green or a Constitution or a Whig or whatever on designation on the ballot, your party central committees are the ones to make the nomination. They go and they say, we want this candidate to represent our party on the ballot. That's usually not a problem until you have the committee man and the committee woman from the same ward wanting the nomination of the party. It's sort of like being asked to pick your favorite kid, and that usually doesn't go very well.
And that creates certain problems for Annie Rice, I take it, Jason.
I guess. But one of the
she won, so it didn't create that many problems.
She won, but this is the point I've been making on social media and in our podcast with her. St. Louis is an 100% Democratic elected city. This is not 1920s or 1930s anymore where Republicans have a chance to win either citywide offices or aldermanic offices. And I hate to plug my own home ward of the 16th Ward, but there are more Republicans that live there than any other part of the city, and a Republican that spent over $20,000 in an aldermanic race only got 32% of the vote in a two-person race. So the reason I bring up that verbose background is you have to question the wisdom of party committees choosing a Democratic nominee in a city where the Democrat is going to win every single local race. Now, to change that would require likely changing the charter in the city, because what Rachel just mentioned are the rules that are enshrined in the charter. And I don't know if this situation prompts people to do that. I think that there are a lot of Democrats in St. Louis that like the fact that aldermanic seats and especially special elections are chosen in this way. But I think that this race has really showcased kind of the anachronism that is.
And what I've said is that you can dislike what the process was and how the process came out and how people were treated in this process, but it is the process that's in law.
I mentioned the potential problem for her being that she's angered some people in the Democratic hierarchy, and that could create problems.
I mean, she has, but again, it's also one of those things where she won, so it didn't create a whole lot of problems. She was going to have to step down if she won as Democratic committee woman anyway. The charter also says that you can't be a member of a central party committee if you're serving as an alderman, because they do pick the replacement candidates. So whether that causes problems, it would be one thing if she had lost and was trying to and was still a Democratic committee woman. Again, these are elected positions, so the ability of elected officials to unseat other elected officials, like Jason says, seems a little weird in some ways. The people picked her to be in office, and they should be the ones to determine whether or not she keeps this Democratic committee woman office if she had lost. I've seen versions of bylaws floating around out there that would give them the ability to essentially vote people who do not support the Democratic candidate off the island, if you will, or to censure or rebuke them. But I've also heard and seen members of the party tell other media outlets that, maybe we need to stop and take a look at this process. And Rice herself said in the podcast yesterday, it makes no sense to go after me and my supporters. We've got to do a big tent here. There's excitement and energy that comes from having multiple people run. People get engaged, and if you block them from being engaged how they want to be engaged, they're not going to come out and vote for the candidates that you want them to in the major elections like August, like November of 2018, when they have candidates on the ballot that they need to protect.
Yeah, well, she's got a year to unruffle whatever feathers have been ruffled, because she's going to run again in March of 19.
In March of 19, and she has said that, and Jason, you were the one who asked her this question, she'll run with the D next to her name in 2019. This is not the first time it has happened that a person has been elected as an independent and then run as a Democrat in their future elections.
Because she's a Democrat. Democrat.
Yeah.
It's not like she's a member of like the Natural Law Party or some obscure party with a different set of ideologies. And that's been the strange thing about this election to me. First of all, Paul Thaler and Annie Rice did not attack each other at all. And you and I both know, Don, that aldermanic races in St. Louis can be incredibly nasty affairs. And this one was not one of them. But their surrogates and supporters kind of were on another level of animosity against each other, which was strange because having read both of their positions on things, fairly similar. I don't want to say exactly similar because Thaler was in favor of a sales tax increase for police pay and Rice was against it. But on a lot of other philosophical issues, these candidates were pretty similar. I think this was just a classic St. Louis proxy war where on one side you had a group of St. Louis politicians that liked Thaler. The other side you had people that didn't like the people that were supporting Thaler. So they tried to say that because people like Cruson or Stephen Conway, the departing alderman,
the firefighters, the police union, etc.
They all were supporting Thaler. Therefore,
he
he was a faux progressive or something. And I didn't really see a lot of evidence of that. And I think it's just kind of an example of how oftentimes when there is a race between two fairly similar candidates, issues aren't often the main source of conflict.
I'm an Eighth Ward resident, so I'm in a lot of those Facebook groups, sort of social media groups, just kind of watching the fun. And yeah, it was a lot of this person supported them, and they'd pull little threads out of a conversation to make it look like an individual. And yes, candidates may have had missteps sort of their own doing, but it was not something that they did for each other. These guys are neighbors, for crying out loud.
Yeah.
I mean, they literally live down the block from each other.
Yeah, and I think and most people agreed, even people that supported the other candidate, that the person they weren't supporting was a good candidate and a good person. It was a remarkably clean race from candidate to candidate perspective.
She's eager to be sworn in, too, as I understand it, because there are some issues that are very close to her heart that she wants to be involved in.
Yeah, and it sounds like they can't swear her in this week because of election certification rules. Not that absentee military ballots are going to make a difference in this race. The margin of victory was big enough, but you still do have to wait for any of those ballots to come in to have those votes counted. Then the Board of Elections has to certify the results. So it'll likely be next Friday, the soonest that she is sworn in. They may wait an additional week or so. But yeah, she is interested in being a part of the discussion around buffer zones at healthcare facilities, specifically the Planned Parenthood clinic at Euclid and Forest Park. And I know she wants to be a part of the conversation around the potential of privatizing Lambert Airport.
One other thing that we've all noticed, I think, with some interest is the fact there are now 13 women on the Board of Aldermen in the city of St. Louis.
13 women and 9 members of the board who have been elected since last April, which is the largest turnover on that board in decades.
Any significance to the gender issue, Jason?
Oh, I think so for sure. We've talked often about how the fact that there's a fairly low percentage of women in the Missouri General Assembly, that might affect how decisions are made or, sexual harassment situations in Jefferson City. I think when you have a board of aldermen that's almost 50-50 split between women and men, and also a female mayor and a female comptroller, and the possibility of a female board of aldermen president, depending on if Louis Reed loses re-election, which I don't want to say is going to happen next year, I think it's just to showcase that in St. Louis there has been some pretty tremendous advancement when it comes to women not only being involved in politics, but wielding significant power.
You also have a female circuit attorney and have for decades now, and female treasurer, not for the first time in decades as well. When she was elected, she became a woman in that position.
And license collector.
And license collector.
And recorder of deeds.
Recorder of deeds. You were waiting to mention that race, weren't you, Jason?
We're going to be picking up on the point of women in politics in just a couple of moments. But let me get your take on it. Look at the national level as well. Mm-hmm. Women are really flexing their muscles these days.
Yeah, they absolutely are. And I think a lot of that was a result of Donald Trump's election in 2016. They saw a reason for them to get motivated. Annie herself said on the podcast, when I spoke to her on election night, that she was asked by the committee woman who held the post before her to run, and asked multiple times to run, and mentioned a group of her supporters put up a slide on that rotating billboard at the corner of 44 and Van Deventer that said, "Run, Annie, run." So they are being asked to run, and they're responding to those calls to run. And yeah, like Jason mentioned, it's 13 now of 29 if you count the board president in that mix, getting towards 50-50. That change has been a little bit more sort of like gradual over time. There wasn't like this big influx of alderwomen joining the board, but even the conversation and discussion about how they're referred to is now they were referred to alderwoman Ingracia, alderwoman Green, alderwoman Rice, and it used to be alderman Ingracia, alderman Tyus, even though they were women, or are women, I should say.
Jason, I think the Me Too movement has had something to do with this surge as well.
Well, I think that people were being elected to office in St. Louis before the Me Too movement. But just one thing
I'm thinking of the broader national scope.
I would think so. I do think, though, that there sometimes is a difference between how women are perceived in politics. I think Megan Green has pointed out many times, I think even on this show, that, she has been, in her view, demeaned in ways that male colleagues wouldn't if they had done similar things. I would even point out that there was a situation in Kansas City where an airport ballot initiative passed, and everyone was like, Sly James is a political mastermind, and he is such a good political power. Well, I didn't hear that type of thing when Prop P passed overwhelmingly, and I didn't hear a lot of people giving Lyda Crewson a lot of credit for that, even though she deserved all the credit for that, because she put a lot of political capital into passing that. So I certainly made the point to credit Mayor Crewson for that, because I think even as journalists, we have to be self-aware that we're not treating male politicians in a different context and with different standards than female politicians who hold the same job. Like in that case, I'm talking about two different mayors in two different cities.
So my thanks to reporters Rachel Lippmann and Jason Rosenbaum. By the way, a few hours after Jason's appearance on our program, his wife Lauren gave birth to their second child. Declan Todd Rosenbaum came into the world about 8:30 last night. Everybody, we are told, is doing very nicely. This is St. Louis on the Air on St. Louis Public Radio, 90.7 KWMU.
Support comes from Missouri Forest Products Association, committed to sustainable and sound conservation of the state's forests, which support more than 41,000 Missouri jobs, resulting in a $10 billion industry. ChooseWood.com.